also helpful to know that like at that time, which is like March of 2017, one of the most, Trump has now entered office. People suddenly cared, not just you, but like people suddenly cared about civilian casualties. And there was a major incident on March 17th, 2017, in which it's called Mosul Jadida. It was the largest admitted civilian casualty incident in the air war against ISIS, and it was being covered by everyone. And suddenly everyone was really in, not just, again, this is not a dig at the magazine or anyone else, like we didn't take it to Luke first or a magazine first because we weren't sure if we had like the narrative ready for that. I'd taken it to Matter at this time when like other publications, especially after Trump was elected, I remember people were like, we're kind of like looking a little bit more domestically right now. Like GQ was really interested and then they weren't. And, so part of it is like kind of waiting for the right moment to pitch too. Like I actually brought the Civilian Casualty Files. Like Luke knew I was working on all this stuff. He knew I had like thousands of records, but I wasn't bringing it to him formally. I did it like when I saw the moment. It was, after the Kabul strike, which is like when I was like, here's everything I have. And we talked, and I do think it's helpful to talk to an editor and have them sort of like crystallize, like, this is the thing that we want to hone in on. Then you're able to do that write up for the people who needs to circulate it too, which is like good to have if you can.
Okay. Let's talk about your reporting, Azmat. You were out in the field for years on this, even a year or more before the time signed on. How did you finance that reporting? I think financing this kind of work for freelancers in particular is quite complicated.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, like this is not a story you would have been assigned in 2016. Like this was not the story about ISIS at the time or the story of that air war. And so like I was pitching, but it wasn't getting taken. I do remember cashing out my retirement because I felt very strongly that it wasn't a big retirement. I was young at the time.
But it was the only one you had.
It's true. So I had been a staffer and I'd kind of just been in this place where, I'd finished ghost schools and investigation that looked at claims. Similarly, it was a ground sample of US funded schools in Afghanistan. Like how many did we actually build? How many were ghost schools? And I was able to show the distinction between what America claimed and the reality on the ground. And I felt at the time I wasn't being assigned to Iraq and Syria. And I was kind of like angry at the time. I remember being like, I can do this. I'll show you. And so I went to go do it and cashed out my retirement and applied for all of these grants and wrote up these.
She's not recommending this to the rest of you, but
I mean, like, I think sometimes like not being that angry wouldn't have allowed me to like try this because I kept seeing the need. Like when I first got into Kayara and I saw like half of the first 10 strike sites I went to had resulted in a civilian death. And I knew that 1 out of 157 is what they were claiming. Like I knew it was an important story and I knew I just had to keep reporting it. So fortunately I got a New America Fellowship, which allowed me to, and that was like June of 2016 or something that I found out that I'd gotten it. And I'd done the interview like right off the back of one of my trips to Iraq. So I had like a lot to talk about and tell them about, and I think they were excited. And so, yeah, Matter paid us out a little bit too when they folded, and we can talk more. And one of my resources I have, the syllabus has like 70 pages. It's a redacted version of my conflict reporting syllabus, but it gets a lot into like budgets and how should you build them and what should you estimate. But yeah, it wasn't until the magazine took it, and then I did have to do a book deal afterwards because I was like, I think I'm a little bit, I think I need to like make up for some costs.
Right.
So it wasn't,
Did you ever figure out like the bottom line on producing it?
Great question.
That is a good question. I do know that at one point, like I ran out of money. I was like in Baghdad and I was like running low on money, and and everyone was like, you're not going to get this embed. And everyone was like, come home. It's just like not going to happen. People aren't even taking it. So I called Anna and then he was like, come home. Like, I don't, he was finishing his PhD here. So he wasn't in the field very much, but he was like, just come back, like, or you should just do frontline reporting in the war against ISIS. Like, it's not going to work. And then I called my little brother and he like wired me a little bit of money. He was like, you can do this.
No.
Very nice. Very nice. This reporting is complicated for so many reasons that I would like to try to peel back some of the layers. One of them is, I think, but I've not reported in this part of the world. So I've reported mostly in Latin America, which is similar in that they're largely male-dominated societies. And being a woman in some of these places can be complicated. You're not only in societies like that, but you're reporting about the military, which is also very male-dominated. So I wonder what that was like and how you dealt with that. And was it as challenging as I'm imagining it to have been?
Yeah, I love reporting in Iraq. Like, I like reporting in Syria, but like one of the things I loved about Iraq was just how comfortable people are with you as a woman, especially compared to other places I've reported. And I think it would be different if I were white, but in Afghanistan, I had tons of problems working with people. I think that I was treated as like a local woman in many cases, as opposed to like a foreign woman. So I didn't really get the benefits of being a foreign woman. And it was actually very difficult there. I think it's far more difficult for Afghan women. So I'm not trying to make a comparison. I'm just comparing my experiences as a Western correspondent in some of these countries. And so I think relative to Afghanistan, I found Iraq like so liberating and I loved it. And just to give you a kind of example, Anand had been working on a story for Harper's in which he was embedding with, he was going into towns that, Shia militias had ransacked or trying to, and he gets to one and he's immediately arrested, blindfolded, put at gunpoint, mock executed, and they treated him horribly. They believed he was like a foreigner who tried to join ISIS, and that's what he was doing in this town. When I showed up in these towns, I'd done a little bit of prep, so I had embedded with one of these militias in advance to keep myself safe. And, I had these photos on my phone to show that. And so when these militias would stop me, they didn't arrest me. They would just be like, "Man, little lady, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Come have tea. Let's take your passport. Let's figure out what you're doing." And I would chat with them and they might send minders with me. And then I would do these not fake interviews, but like innocuous ones, because you can't have minders with you in these cases. So I would do interviews that were about healthcare under ISIS. And when the minders wouldn't leave, I would transition to dental care under ISIS. And the most boring thing, I couldn't have come up with more questions about teeth than I did. And we were looking in people's mouths. It was weird, but the minders left. The minders totally left. And I don't think I would have been able to do that had I been a guy. I really like reporting in Iraq as a woman.
Yeah, very cool. What about when you go into these homes and you're alone and you want folks to talk to you often about probably the worst thing that's ever happened to them? When you're going in on a trip like that, are you in and out and never see them again? And what does it take to get people there to sort of open up in that way? What is the first conversation like, and then what follows?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you have to, with people like this, I knew media literacy, as I might know it, is not strong with many of these people I'm talking to. So there's a lot of context ahead of time. Here's who I am, here's what I'm doing and why. I was really explicit about the fact that, America has made these claims. This evidence suggests that might not be the case. I want to get to the truth of what this is. And I was also, especially for when I had the files, many years later, and I was doing that reporting, I was really nervous that somebody might think that because I have these files, that I'm a member of the government or that I'm aligned with this. I was very explicit about explaining, the who, what, where, why I'm doing this. Was I sued my government to get these. I filed a lawsuit. I was able to get these. I was really transparent about that. I tell them, what I intend to do with this. I tell them, you don't have to answer any of my questions. If I ask anything that is hurtful or harmful, please know I don't intend to. Forgive me. You can totally just say, no, I don't want to answer that. Because they're not, especially because people are so inviting. I would say if there are children around, we can also, they don't have to be here. In fact, it's probably better because a lot of times they wouldn't like send their children out when we would be looking at graphic images. And so I'd have to like explicitly say that. And then also just, I would give them sort of time. And so my beginning question, after you get through all of that and they agree, was just, where does the story start for you? And that allows them to begin it where they'd like. Some people like to start immediately with the night of. Other people like to start, you know, earlier than that, like tell you more about themselves, but that's a good way of kind of starting to figure out where they want to take that. I spent a lot of time, I've spent way more time on these interviews than what I needed, because like you want to make these people feel like they have dignity. Like you want to treat them like they're an expert in the towns they live in, that their stories are valuable, and that context can help you too. So like actually the healthcare under ISIS reporting, not the dental, but the healthcare stuff was interesting and useful. And
Dental is a very important part of healthcare.
it was not, I could be so embarrassed.
We can talk about Afghan teeth, you know. Oh.
But you know, a lot of like, what was most, I asked them, depending on their age, like, what was most so like when you were growing up compared to now? Or I would ask about like ration cards, which are like, you know, the things that I was interested in. So like the government gives ration cards to people. They're entitled to like food subsidies. And like, how is the ration card different today than it was when you were growing up? Because like food quality has gone down considerably, and you learn things about like how economic realities changed. But they also feel like a lot of pride being like, I'm helping you understand this place. I'm helping you understand this context. And then you're not also only associated with the worst night of their lives. They don't just think of you as this person who's like rehashing all their trauma. And so I spent a lot of time after I'm done with all of the like civilian casualty related stuff, trying to transition out to something uplifting. And so for a lot of people, they would, you know, I'd ask them how they cope, and they would talk about God and faith, or, you know, I would ask about children and like school, and like just get them out of the mindset.
This is all very trauma-informed kind of reporting. And, you know, you told a story once that I heard at a different panel where you talked about time. And you talked about a person who you went to see and spent days, maybe a week or two, hoping he would tell you the story. Would you tell that story?
Yeah, it was actually Basim. So in the beginning, like I met him, and the first time I met him, we maybe sat down for like a 2 or 3 hour interview. And then I did my digging, and I would follow up, and I would encourage you, if you expect a long timeline with somebody, like send them what you can share with them for their comments. Like, here's what the military said to me. They said they have no record of this. What do you think about that? And so he was still involved, and I would come back to Iraq, and I needed to get the night of for that lead that Luke read. Like that night of was so important to get. Obviously, it was like the key to like a magazine pitch, right? I didn't have it because he wasn't like fully ready to talk about it. And so like there was a 2-week period when I was with him, and every day for lunch we would meet, and we're supposed to talk about the night of, and he would be like, Azmat, I'm just like, I'm in such a good mood today. I can't do it. And like I came back without it, and it was like, what were you doing? And I was like, I swear I was like working every day. I went to these places, those places, but like I didn't get that because he wasn't ready to talk about it. I'm not going to like force him to. And it worked out well because over time he became a lot more comfortable talking about it, and he was able to talk about it on his own terms. And eventually he was even able to talk about it directly to the Daily. And I'm really glad that I had that timeline.
Yeah.
You know, if I didn't have it, I think it would have been hard.
I think that's another sort of exceptional thing about this story and these kinds of stories, is that the reporters have the benefit of time to build relationships with sources that put their sources at ease, also give their sources some control over the story, right? Which seemed very important to Basim and to you, which, you know, I think is terrific.